Window entire. Okay, I brought the screen. Can put that on the right side. But when we start, what once we are already live.
Yeah,
All right. All right. Hello, everyone. How are you doing, guys? So this is our first cloud infrastructure as a
yeah,
journey here. So let me introduce Kasun, who for the people or friends who don't know, Kasun is Microsoft Azure MVP, joining from Netherlands. His whole work career is actually built on top of uh, kind of Windows technologies and infrastructure, so that he helps the companies to move their uh, on-prem, I believe, investments and assets like servers and everything into the cloud. But he's also not just on Microsoft Azure, but he also had some experience with AWS, right, in the past.
yeah.
And Kasun, so is there anything else you want to talk about yourself?
Yeah, yeah. So you gave a good introduction about me. So apart from that, I daily work with DevOps technologies like Azure DevOps and building pipelines and those kind of things. And I always passionate about infrastructure as code, so I always try to uh, automate the infrastructure provisioning through uh, different type of infrastructure. Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you for that. I'm not going to talk about myself. Probably you guys already know. I'm a cloud marathoner, Elhan. Yeah, my Twitter handle, and I believe Kasun also put his own later in the slide somewhere. But the whole
yeah,
purpose for you guys to join this channel and why we are doing that is actually help the new starters, newcomers, to learn about infrastructure as a code, how you can get started, and we'll start from first from very basics. So today we'll cover basically, the bare bones and fundamentals, how you want to get started. But idea here is not just to serve, people who just starting. So once we build on top of that, even if you are experienced, let's say person who is doing infrastructure as a code using the familiar tools that we are going to demonstrate today, you can actually pick up certain things that you might be missing, or you, let's say, skip that in your day-to-day interactions, because the whole idea and technologies in this space in basically automation and using infrastructure as a code for compliance and as well as automation reasons for your company, it's actually changing. There's a lot of
yeah.
change going on. And even for us, like even though we are MVPs and using these tools, every month there are new things because the Bicep language itself is still getting developed. It's kind of new features are added. Sometimes they deprecate certain things, so certain APIs may not work as you expected it to be working, let's say 3 months ago. So from that perspective, it's a dynamic field where you want to be in. And the whole idea for us to come together and create this for communities to keep you in loop and as well as share things. And if you find something that we didn't cover, right, which is very possible, please, use the chat, right? So we'll monitor the chat. Kasun, can you open the YouTube chat? I'm not sure if you would get anything here. Would we get any
Uh,
chat responses on this channel if
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
types?
yeah. I will
Cool.
get those chats
Okay,
comments in the stream yard, so
awesome.
I can.
Great, awesome. So Kasum will be on the lookout. So if you have any a comment, any question,
Yeah,
put it there. That's why we are here, okay, to
yeah,
answer your
sure.
questions. But in addition to that, I want to just you to learn to know two things. First, this channel is for you guys to learn about things that are happening in the infrastructure as a code, and we are going to expand it beyond the traditional tools like ARM templates and Bicep. We'll also bring some Terraform and other things to make sure that you know what's going on. And plus, you can up your game by using those best practices, new developments in your data interactions to get into better space where you are now. And if you are interested, we can also bring the certifications later on into our, you know, channel so that you can get up to speed in terms of how you can get up, trained for those certifications. What's the experience on the exam day, and basically, just make sure that you can prove what you know through the certifications, if that's what your employer wants, if that's what the market wants for you. Okay, so let's get started. I don't want to, just plainly talk here. Let's look at our agenda, what we are going to cover today. So in terms of things that we will cover today, there are a number of things. The first, we will start with what you need uh, what you need to have in place for infrastructure, or why you need this infrastructure as a code. What's the reason to spend your time and to learn that if you never did this? Okay, what's the beauty of that? Then we will move into infrastructure as a code tools in Azure. We'll give like very brief overview of that. And it's not going to, of course, has all the tools there, but we'll mention the major ones, major players in this field. And then we'll look into infrastructure as a code deployments in Azure. Okay, what type of um, uh, developments are happening in Azure in terms of
yeah,
like Bicep, right? What's happening in Bicep? What's the deal with ARM templates and stuff like that?
yeah,
Next thing, we are going to look into what is ARM and Bicep, right? So how you can differentiate that, because they are like, chicken and egg in some samples. Some people get confused. They are both coming from Microsoft, but when to use which one and how they are related. So we'll dive into that questions. In addition to that, in infrastructure as a tools, if you have any questions about like similar products and what's the difference, the use cases where to use that one, we'll cover that one as well. And finally, we'll have demos in between of these things, so that you get some hands-on understanding. And we'll share our GitHub repo where all the code, everything that we are going to demo today, including the scripts, right? They are all there. They are created for you. And we will modify them as we go to make sure they are in the state they are even bare. And plus, if you find any error or you want to contribute into that GitHub of our episode one, which we'll share again at the end of the session, you are very, very welcome to contribute. It's created for you guys, it's open source. We want you to be part of this journey. We want you to be part of this cloud infrastructure journey. I hope this sounds interesting for everyone. Anything
yeah.
else, Kasun, you would like to add to that?
Yeah, not not much. So me also very excited to do these sessions for you guys. So if you have any questions, please share with us so we can give our experience and help to resolve those questions and any clarifications. Right? Yeah. So we have exciting lineup for you guys today. So let's check those what are we are going to discuss today.
Yeah, let's dive in. So thank you,
Yeah,
Kasun. So you heard the Kasun. If you have questions, guys, chat is there for you. So just put that there, and we are going to be on the lookout for them. Let's dive in to see, start with why you need this infrastructure as a code, and then rest of it. Okay. So let's
yeah,
go here. So why you need infrastructure as a code? Here I would say um, there are a number of reasons, right? So there are a number of reasons why you would need that. First one is going to be consistency, right? So you want to have infrastructure as a code, so your infrastructure will always have the same settings no matter whatever environment it is in. So you want to make sure that your code get consistently deployed between environments, so to speak, right? So let's say there's a dev environment, you have a staging, you have development, you may have in between environments before reaching the production. So there you want to handle that consistently, and that consistency is actually achievable using infrastructure as a code. Second, why you would need to spend your time for infrastructure as a code is the speed. Okay, so it's a infrastructure as a code, actually it's an accelerator, so to speak. It accelerates your infrastructure component creation, modification, and deployment. And the reason why it accelerates that, because it's in the code, right? It's you see what's happening, and plus you can modify as you go, which actually brings another point of that, which is the automation, speed and plus automation. That's why you need that in place. And infrastructure as a code actually takes the provisioning of infrastructure on a next level by automating the infrastructure component creation, right? For example, you want to create the new AKS cluster on the Azure subscription, which you have for the development. So at that point, instead of doing that manually through portal, you can automate that using the infrastructure as a code tools that we are going to share today. And that would help you to create not just those resource components, but also you can bake in the configuration, right, of that AKS cluster into your configuration file. And you can reduce the manual hours, minutes, whatever you use to deploy those resources to manage them. So it will lower your time, and it will also eliminate the human error out of the scope, because each time we click around the portal, put the config information, we can miss something. We are humans. Automation is there to help us. So in terms of version control, um, Kasun, do you want to speak about this part?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So version control is one of the very key benefit of infrastructure as a code, because when we are provisioning the infrastructure in traditional methods like using scripts and by using portal, we don't have a way of tracking the changes that we done to our infrastructure. So if something goes wrong, then we have a hard time of identifying what are the changes we have done, who has done the changes, those kind of things. So by using this infrastructure as a code, we can because we treat our infrastructure as a code, so therefore we can our track and version the changes that we done for our infrastructure. So any point of time, we can trace back and see what are the changes we have done. So who has done the changes, what are the effects that have happened due to that change. So because of that, we can have a much more visibility on what are the changes we have done in the past in for our infrastructure.
Yeah, so it's actually an awesome place in terms of version control, guys. I will just add that imagine that there was a new deployment number 557, whatever you have in the pipeline, and you deploy that. But while deploying that, then the tester QA came that saying that, hey, certain components are missing, there's a misconfiguration, and sites are not able to connect to each other. Like let's say you have a web server and you have a storage account, which should be having their a connection, right? And you might, if you do it on a high level and security, you want to use managed identities there so they can talk with each other and recognize. But that thing is not working because you or your teammate made a change last night or a day before, which actually didn't go through well. At that point, version control give you power to roll back and deploy the last known good version, which you are sure that's going to work. Maybe it will miss one or two features that you want to deploy for testing, but at least you can roll back and deploy a version of the infrastructure that you are sure that it's working, so you don't have issues there. So that's kind of lifesaver, right? Especially in IT when you are dealing with deployments and you have to support the deployments. Yeah, thank you. Next things that we have is actual collaboration, right? So infrastructure as a code, another beauty of that is it actually invites collaboration. And that when we speak about collaboration there, it's all about people, right? So by standardizing your deployments of your resources using the infrastructure as a code, it will help to development team, to each team member understand what's going on, right? You can increase the awareness. Then from operations perspective, you can collaborate, and operations people can also, if they are interested in infrastructure as a code, they can contribute into the development and maintenance of the resources that you are deploying for your work. And in addition to that, this would invite collaboration from security team, right? Because in a real world, when we have the projects, let's be honest, security is always in mind, and it sometimes may not be direct responsibility of developers.
Uh, I think I can't hear you.
Where, okay, can you hear me? I'm on YouTube. So guys, give us thumbs up or something so we know they are there. And if there's some glitches, you know, It would be great to hear from you in the chat if something cut off or so. New. So how are we
Uh,
doing, Kasun? I know that it shows we are live here.
uh, can you hear me? I can't hear it.
Yeah, I can hear you. You can't hear me? I can hear you well, and I see you. Can you hear me? Yeah, just check your volume tab on the laptop. See, if it is up. Sometimes it can go down. Can't hear you, man. Let's see what's going on. How about now? No? Okay, let me rejoin. I'm going to rejoin studio, okay? Or
Yeah,
can hear me? No?
yeah. Now I can hear you. Yeah, sure.
You can hear me?
Yeah,
Okay. All right, so
yeah.
probably something was a glitch, so yeah. We are back again. We are going. Probably there's something with Bluetooth connection, right? Yeah. So where we were actually, we were in collaboration. We were speaking that how infrastructure as a code is going to enhance collaboration between teams, between the team members, to make sure that you guys can, look and see what's going to be deploying, plus, work together to make it even better, add new features together, and make sure that even security components of your deployment are part of this code, right? Part of this infrastructure as a code, so that whenever you deploy based on the environment where you are deploying, you have those security services, security controls in place, so that team can come and review that, and every team would be on a sync. Okay, everybody knows what's going on. All right. This is some of the whys that we put here on the slide, but as a working professionals, I'm pretty sure you may have your own perspective, right? And the idea here with this community channel is that we want you to share that perspective. So if you have something else in your mind, please put that in the chat, and we will gladly share that with everyone who is listening, you know, who is listening to our channel. So please put that in the comments. We are looking for your interactions. Okay, Kasun, you are actually on a mute now.
Yeah.
Okay, they are unmuted. Yeah, good. So, anything else maybe you wanted to add here before we jump to the next part and then go with the demos?
Uh, yeah, I think these are the most important things we need to know about when it comes to infrastructure as
Mm-hmm.
code, because yeah, most of the infrastructure as a code tools are built around these concepts. So if you have a solid idea about these concepts and the idea of why we need to use this infrastructure code around these concepts, then I think anyone you have some we have the knowledge why we need to use it in your project, in your future project, if you're not using infrastructure as a code at current.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll just add that if, for example, you are a system administrator who wants to use this infrastructure as a code converted into this repeatable and automated way of managing your infrastructure, and you need some convincing factors, right, to speak with your boss, to speak with your manager, here it is. We put them here all together and we talked about them. So just make your pitch to your manager, and I hope that he or she will agree,
yeah,
to move into infrastructure as a code environment so that you can do more modern deployment and management of your resources. All right. So I hope that's, where it's helpful. That said, we are switching the gears here to the next portion, which is what are these tools? So we spoke about infrastructure as a tool, infrastructure as a code, but what are the tools that commonly used in Azure at the point, right? So here in this episode, in this part, we are going to talk about that. So first of all is ARM template, right? So ARM template has been there for a long time, and it's basically JSON representation, right? That has been in Azure way back from the beginning when actually Azure moved from classic to the modern state, which is now. And I believe that happened around like 2016, right? 2016. maybe 15, but I think it's 2016, where we start, where Azure team and the people who were in Microsoft Azure, they start to use this JSON representation of the resources that are getting deployed and managed in Azure environment. And in terms of logo, you are all familiar. This is the logo of the ARM templates. And this has been for a long time serving, but there are some challenges with ARM template. And those challenges are, some of them is it has very high learning curve, meaning it's not intuitive. Even if you are well versed in programming, it's not like you're writing an infrastructure code. It's more of a declaring resources using the JSON representation. So you need to understand JSON markup language, how to link the things and stuff like that. So it's not easy, let's be honest. Next one is Azure Bicep. Kasun, do you want to go here a little bit?
Yeah. So Azure Bicep is a new DSL language,
Domain specific language, yeah,
domain specific
DSL. Yeah.
language. Yeah. So Azure Bicep introduced because of there are the limitations that are in ARM templates, because as Elhan mentioned, by using JSON is not user friendly, and it will take a lot of time and effort, and you need to write a lot of code in when creating ARM template with JSON. So to mitigate those disadvantages and uh, disadvantages, Microsoft introduced Bicep. So Bicep is has their own specific language, and it is much more easier for us to understand what the code do, what the provision, the infrastructure declaration done doing, and it is has very easy learning curve for us if you are new to infrastructure as a code. So, and it has a lot of additional features that are not available in ARN templates, like if you want to create modules, um, and if you want to do loops, create multiple resources at the same time, those are available in ARM templates, but it is much more harder to do them. But Bicep make it much more easier.
Yeah, agree. So there's a lot of things to learn on Bicep, and it's in development, meaning that it's still getting evolved.
Yeah,
It's not on stable version 1.0 yet, and you will see that while we were right after this side. Just to be back, we are going to show you comparison between ARM template and Azure Bicep, and you would understand what we mean, that it's much easier, it's code friendly to manage your infrastructure, Azure infrastructure in Bicep language rather than in ARM template. But it will show both of them, so don't worry about that. You'll get the examples right after this slide. So stay tuned for that. Okay. Next is actually Terraform, right? Terraform is a big player, so everybody heard the name. It can actually, the one of the good sides is that if you invest your time into Terraform, you can also reuse that across like some clouds, AWS and Azure. And I believe Google Cloud also supports it as a provider for Terraform.
yeah,
It's more recent one than when you compare with other two cloud providers, but that's kind of the beauty of it. So with Terraform, but it has its own learning curve, right? So it's you need to understand providers, how to set them up, and plus, even though this Terraform kind of simplifies, I would say, semantics, right, in terms of how you want to use that, but still for each cloud service provider, you need to have some deeper knowledge in terms of the service, what that service is expecting. So Terraform tries to, I would say, bring another layer on top of those Azure cloud resources across different clouds. But again, uh, it just can't do that much, right? So there are still a number of things where you need to learn about each cloud provider resource specific stuff so that you can actually use that tool effectively. So keep that in mind. So it's not going to elevate that type of, I would say, know-how or discovery that you need to make for each resource. Um, Other than that, there are a lot of differences between Terraform and Bicep, right? So, and I believe you might be interested in that because these are the, things to consider when you are trying to work on a new project or consider existing one. And Kasun, in your understanding, so if you compare like Terraform with Azure Bicep, so what's the What are the differences? Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So uh, comparing Terraform and Bicep, so both have pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what I think was in the Terraform, one of the pro I see advantage of using Terraform is it has a state management. So that means Terraform keep track of what are the resources that are provisioned and the state of the resources. But Bicep still doesn't have that kind of state management in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the Terraform, I think it has a lot of other providers that are can integrate with your project. Right? Terraform has different providers support, like random providers. Then, if you want to use a third-party provider into your um, project, then you can use that Terraform third-party provider to provision those resources, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but in the Bicep, some kind of those type of additional toolings are not available yet, but we can do it on a different approach, right? Another in Terraform side, I see a disadvantage because Terraform doesn't support what all the new services that are coming to the issue, because Terraform has to develop and update their provider with the newest services that are available in the Azure. But if you want to try provision newest services in Azure, then I will suggest you need to go with Bicep, because Bicep directly interacting with the Azure ARM layer. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever the Azure releases a new service, Bicep has support for that one. So
Yeah.
those are the few advantages and
Yeah.
disadvantages in Terraform.
Right. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I will just mention that for all the people who are watching us, as you know, these tools are actually interacting through APIs, right? And with Azure Bicep, if there's like say there's a day zero, so to speak, to wait for any change that happen in Azure. For example, if there is a new features that deployed into the Azure Firewall service, let's say there was a new basic SKU that's added. I will just go with the recent one, right? So if you want to use that SKU for your deployment with Terraform, it's not going to be available. You have to wait for those updates of the provider specific plugin, right? Of that code version to happen and include that update so that you can interact with and bring that new SKU and everything. With Azure Bicep or ARM templates, it's going to be available right away because that API, once it's exposed, that feature is announced. The same day you can actually go and to your Azure Bicep or ARM templates provision that API version, which will have that new feature or what we are looking for. So that's the beauty of that, that you don't have to wait for the change on the third-party tools like Terraform to update their code and providers in order to be able to use that one. And another one Kasun actually mentioned, but it's a big thing, it's a state file, right? State file. So in Azure Bicep and ARM templates, you are not managing that file. And if even if if that file gets corrupted in your Terraform, you're in a big trouble, right?
Yeah,
You wouldn't be able to do anything with that. You have the version control, make sure it's up to date and doesn't get corrupted. That's very important. Otherwise, you're out of luck to deploy it again.
yeah,
With Azure Bicep and ARM templates, you don't manage that. What happens instead is that Azure Bicep, before deploying your code, you can have this pre-flight check validation where your code, your resource configurations are going to be, compared against the existing resources that are already deployed into that resource group or subscription, wherever the scope you deployed, and then the difference are going to be shown to you. So to speak, Azure will manage that for you, right? So you have this state machine, Azure State Machine, which is multi-billion, enterprise that's running in the cloud, that's going to do that for you for free. So you don't have to worry about that. Yeah, I see our friend Martin actually put the message there. Greetings. So hey, Martin, thank you for joining. Let us know if you have any questions and put them in the comments. All right. Yeah, so let's move here. We are a bit late on the schedule. We try to explain these things, but let's cover Pulumi and then look at the differences between Bicep code and ARM template and how they are related. Okay, and I'll bring the Visual Studio Code uh, right after this slide. So Pulumi, it's another so to speak buzz saying that everywhere it's talked, it's part of the infrastructure as a code, but it's more of a programming like for infrastructure as a code rather than when you compare with other tools. And speaking about Pulumi, what's your impression, Kasun? How far so far? What was your interaction and experience? Can you speak about that?
Yeah, Polemy is more like a developer-friendly approach for infrastructure code. So, Polemy has support. Polemy provides support for most popular uh, programming language like Python, C Sharp, then JavaScript, those kind of most popular programming language. So if your project, let's assume that you have a application that need to, if you have a .NET application and that application
Mm-hmm.
used to provision infrastructure in the cloud, then you can use Pulumi uh, to Pulumi C Sharp libraries to provision that infrastructure into the Azure. So then, as a C Sharp developer, you don't have to learn separately how to provision, how to program for a specific infrastructure code tool like Bicep or Terraform. If you have no C
Mm-hmm.
Sharp, then you can easily provision resources into the cloud by using the libraries.
All right, very good, very good. So yeah, there might be some other ones as well. Maybe you heard like on AWS, there's AWS SDKs, right? They are very hot at the moment. So this is the comparison where you can get Pulumi, which is can do that also across providers. But again, the main idea here is that you will be dependent on that third-party service and updates that they put in place in terms of libraries, updates, and everything. Whenever new feature or update or bug fix, whatever it is, comes, you are dependent on that third party provider. So keep that in mind, guys. And based on how comfortable you are with that updates and third party providers, you can make your own choice. So we are not pushing you toward this or that decision. We want to try to explain everything. And if you are missing something in this picture, hey, you have a chat, you have everything here. It's time to chime in and put your perspective. We are looking for that. Okay. All right. And Kasun will display your comment, whatever question you have here on the studio. So, so don't wait for that. Just put that there. All right. Let's switch the gears here on Azure related things because we want to focus on this episode more on to ARM template and Bicep. All right. And then we'll have actual survey at the end of our show. And if you have interest to learn about some other parts of infrastructure as a code, this would be your opportunity to put your feedback. So please don't miss it out. Okay. We'll also put that in our YouTube channel, that form, that survey. Even if you watch it later on, let's say, it's early morning Saturday on your local time, or it's evening, who knows where you are joining from, right? By the way, thank you for joining from. If you are, it's too late for you and you're still up and still watching this channel, YouTube, big thank you for you. We'll try to, deliver and help you in that journey, in your individual cloud infrastructure journey. So without any ado, let's bring the Visual Studio Code and look into differences and similarities in a simple view for ARM template and Bicep. Right? Does it sound good, Kasun, for you?
Yeah, for sure. Let's
All right, let's bring it.
dive deep in.
All right, so I'm going to bring a Visual Studio Code now, as you see on the screen. And the good thing, it's all on GitHub. So you are going to get the URL for this EP1, which stands for Episode 1, infrastructure as a code in Azure. Okay, and here you would find like folders and some files. And thank you, Kasun, for displaying that URL. Can you put that in the chat as well, or you already put that?
Yeah, it's already in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great. So basically, this is the GitHub repo where by the end of our session, we want you to get very familiar with deployment file and how you can utilize modules using the Azure Bicep. But before jumping to any of those terminologies, let's go with a simple understanding. So in terms of JSON, right? If you are familiar with the previous things, so what we see here is a representation of a storage account using the JSON. ARM JSON representation, right? So this is the what ARM template looks like. Usually, because it's a JSON file, you need to have a schema. Okay, then you can have a versioning, content versioning, metadata. It's something that it's going to be generated if you generated your ARM template from some things. In our case, we actually use the Bicep language to generate that. That's why you see that metadata here. And then you have all the information about the resource. In our case, to keep the thing simple, we have you know storage account representation here. But if we compare this with the storage account that's Bicep, let me bring that on another and then share the screen here. Okay, not this one. Hmm. So view, where is split up?
Split up. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, not this one. I think I wanted to split up in a way that split left, split right actually. Yep. Here we go. Let me take this out. Okay. So if you split out here and put it on a bigger screen, and let me zoom in a little bit. Yeah, here we go. So here on the left side, what we see is basically that ARM template that I just talked about. So here in the resource, you have resource type, you have API version, name of that resource, which in our case is storage account, and then we have the version, SKU name, and all other kind of jars and bars. So resource group.id here is the function that's going to provide the region for the deployment. In the right side, what we see is a simple representation of that, similar storage account using the Azure Bicep code. And as you see, first it's less lines. And believe me, the more bigger, more complex project becomes, there will be, I would say, much, much less lines in your storage account, in your representation of Bicep code in compared to the JSON declaration. Anything else, Kasun, you would like to add?
Yeah. So when you go with JSON, when your application is growing, and if you have a lot of application added to your JSON, it will much get more complicated. But when you coming to the Bicep, you can see the difference between those two codes. In to create a storage account in ARM template, it will you need to write 24 lines of code, but in
Hmm.
uh, Bicep you can do it on 10 codes, like
Yeah, so it's
reducing
almost half here, right?
or almost half of code. Yeah,
Half, and it's going to be even less when you
yeah,
go and use the modules, right? And we
modules.
are
Yeah,
going to speak about that. It's
yeah.
a code reuse. Okay, so awesome. Thank you for chiming in. So as you see, the difference is that it's a bit different in Bicep when you combine the resource type and API version of that. They come together. And then the rest of them, naming, location, SKU name, they kind of similar, right? It's just represented more like a code on the right side where we have a Bicep code than a JSON representation that we see here on the left side, right? So that's the difference. So there are similarities, of course, because they are similar. I would say they compile and then decompile to each other, meaning that if you have one version of that, you can get the Bicep version or JSON version, depending what you have. All right, I think that's kind of clears it out in terms of what's the difference and how they look like. And of course, we'll dive into deploying them and everything. And I don't want to jump the guns here, but if you somehow want to go and deploy that and you want to learn about scripts, you can check the scripts here. They are here in this folder for you, but we'll come to that stage. Okay, so let's jump back to our slides now as we showed you our first demo where we compare those things. So once we compare them, it's kind of clear for you now what's the Bicep, what's the ARM template, right? But in terms of history of infrastructure as a code developments, right? So what happened in Azure? Can you briefly, Kasun, go through that and give us a little bit of, history, what was first, what was second, and what's going on?
Yeah. So as Elhan mentioned that in early stage of 2015 or 16, um, Azure moved into the ARM-based API version. So in that ARM-based API version, they have introduced ARM templates to provision in the infrastructure as a code. So in I think in 2016 they have introduced the ARM, and they use it for a very long time, like in 2021 until 2019 kind of yes. So then they identified that there are some limitations in ARM templates, like with maintainability and um, managing when your infrastructure is growing lot uh, more and more, then manageability will be harder in ARM template. So and the users of ARM templates also has their own feedback regarding to improve the ARM templates. So they have raised different opinions. So because of that, I should decide to simplify the provisioning of infrastructure code by introducing the Bicep. So they initially launched it in 2019 or 20. I can't remember the exact time frame.
Hmm.
Then Bicep use their own DSL domain specific language. So as we did com- done a comparison previously, we can see that it has reduced a lot of complexity from the ARM templates, and it has very we can, as a developer or a DevOps engineer, you can you have a very easy learning curve to learn Azure Bicep compared to the ARM templates. And there are
Also,
some uh, advantages as well
right.
in using Bicep.
Yeah, I will just add what Kasun mentioned. So with Bicep language, there was a need for ARM template team
Yeah.
in Microsoft make this simpler. People were not happy with the complexity. It was hard to start learning and understanding what's going on in order to manage your infrastructure as a code, right, in the Azure environment. And then basically Microsoft Azure ARM team came with the idea we have to do something, and the one of the ways to put the abstraction on top of ARM template, because you don't want to change that big thing that you already have and it's working and proven. And that's where the Azure Bicep code came in. It was end of 2019, I believe. It's Ignite event where it was announced first as a beta, and then it has been gradually, getting new features and up to speed. Now it's on a version 0.15 or so, as far as I remember. But they have their community calls, and they are hopefully this year, when nobody knows, it will have its first 1.0 stable version released. But I would say that from starting from the version 0.3, which is almost a year and a half now, it has been on a official Microsoft support, meaning that if you start use your in your infrastructure as a code deployment and management of resources, if you start using the Azure Bicep and you get into some issues, which is production related or whatever you do for your company, you can open official Microsoft support ticket, and you will get responses, you will get help with that, meaning that you are not abandoned there on your own, even though it's not the stable version 1.0, but it is much stable, much better product at this time, because there are a number of companies, a number of people, and community who is using that actively every day. Okay. All right. That's it. Let's switch the gears here again and go to the more about Azure Bicep here. This we are not going to repeat what we just kind of mentioned. It's a DSL standing for the domain specific language, meaning that you can use that on Azure only at the moment. It You can compile your Bicep code into ARM templates. That's why it's a transparent abstraction over ARM JSON. Then it's much simpler, and you already saw the code sample. And then let's look at the next stage of how you can use and get the benefit of Azure Bicep code. Okay, in terms of this infrastructure as a code and abstract and on top of ARM templates, as you see in this graphic that we took from Microsoft Learn documents, the Bicep language is actually standing on top of ARM templates. And if you think about other providers, they are also standing in this graph where all the code, all the change that you want to do on your Azure resources, for example, it can be your uh, Kubernetes cluster. It can be, your storage account, your compute service, whatever you have in Azure. They all go to this Azure Resource Manager layer where authentication happens, and as well as conversion to ARM template actually also happens. So that's why it's abstraction over that ARM layer, ARM JSON. Our Bicep language get converted into ARM template before deploying, but that thing is actually, I would say, obfuscated. It's taken out from your view. You don't worry about ARM JSON at that point. You just want to provision your Bicep code in a way that it is, you know, compliant, it's compilable, and there's a Bicep extension that's going to help you, and we are going to show that to you. All right, so you know that your Bicep code is in a good shape to be deployed. Anything else, Kasum, maybe you want to add here in this picture?
Uh, no, I think you have already explained a lot of behind the scenes uh, concepts how the bicep is working with the RMLA. Yeah, I think that's good for.
Move. Okay, let's
Yeah.
move. And again, it comes to questions and answers before the demos. We have the a number of demos here baked up, and I think we are going to switch to the demos at the moment. But in the meanwhile, if you have questions, please bring them. All right, so I'm going to switch to our Visual Studio Code that's actually using this GitHub repo that Kasun shared in the chat. It's episode 1, infrastructure as a code in Azure. So here, again, guys, before jumping the guns, I want to say that when you do, for example, a simple storage account, it's easy to start. So, and just to give you idea about that, there's a lot of snippet codes that you can use. But in order to be able to use and see this color coded things on your Visual Studio Code, you need to install an extension. And if you go to the extension panel here in Visual Studio Code and type the bicep, which I'm doing right now, you would see that you have this bicep extension. You want to make sure you install that and enable it. Okay. Then you would be able to see the help from the Visual Studio Code in typing and managing the bicep code. So make sure that you install this extension. So once you're done with that, I'm going to switch back to the code. Then you should be able to see a number of things that you can use. So in my case, I'm going to provision this storage account using the code snippets that bicep config or bicep extension is providing. So if I type .res, okay, which stands for resource, then you can put a dash and say, okay, I want to get storage account, right? So here, when you provision, I type sto, as you see here, and I have a choices. So these are the ready-made templates for you to choose what you are trying to provision. In our case, so this is resource that creates VM script for Windows, but that you can try. There's a log analytics solution. In our case, we'll keep the thing simple because that would make it easier for you to start learning and take the storage. So I can press on tab here on my keyboard, and then here it is. I just need to fill into the blanks, and this is the minimum what you can have a storage account. So here we can say that, okay, cloud storage, that's what I name. So you can go and put the name. Name needs to be actually compliant with storage account name. As you know, it needs to be between 3 to 24 characters long, and it should not have any specials, any hyphens, just the letters and numbers. Okay, that's the and it needs to be unique and globally unique string. So in our case, I'm going to type cloud journey storage, and today's day, let's say it's March, right? Or in the March 25th. So I'll say 0325 to keep it. So location here is actually a region where you want to deploy. In our case, if you already know your location, you can type it in. Or if you want that to be inherited from the resource group where you are going to deploy, you can use this resource group function that you see on top, which is the recommended way to do. So let's add this resource group, and later on we will move those things into parameters, right? Because we want to parameterize and make our code reusable. That's the idea. So we put it here. Next, you can define the storage type, in our case storage v2, and as SQ, which is basically which tier of storage you want to use. Do you want to use premium? You want to use like standard. So based on that, you can do it. So in your case, we have this good, pop up here. As you see, it's coming again from Bicep extension that we highly recommend to install. And here we'll choose the least expensive one, which is the locally redundant storage, right? The standard. So let's choose that one. And that's it. So our new storage account is provisioned in, if I wouldn't talk, probably I would do that in 20 or 25 seconds. But now you know how to do that using those very powerful templates by typing RES, which stands for resource, and then dash. And then just choose what you want. So, for example, if you want to provision a web app, then you can type web and it will come up. All right. And we are going to, you will see that example later on. So we deployed this, which is awesome. But how you would know if your Bicep code is in a good shape, right? Meaning that it would be able to deploy to your Azure subscription, to your resource group, and being able to deploy. You can always right click on this file, and this is also coming from Bicep extension, and you can say here build ARM template. So once I click on this build ARM template, what is going to happen is that we are going to get another file with the same name storage.json, and that's going to be a ARM.json template representation of this Bicep code. Let's do that. So as you see, I get a new file created here. And if I look into inside this ARM template representation, I can see that I have two resources. I have two storage accounts. This is the first one that we created that has been there actually as a Bicep code. And this is the second one that we just created with the name we put and with the location that's using this function of resource group to retrieve the region of the resource group that we are using. Okay. All right. Okay. So we have it here, everything. Okay, that's good. Next, what we are going to do is we'll look into how we can parameterize that. So in our case, in the previous demo, you saw how to create from scratch your resource group. Now in this demo, what we have is we that for the name of the storage, we move that into a parameter as you see here. And if you want to have a default value for your parameter, you can always put equal sign and define what value you want to have. If you don't put that, and let's say you keep it like this, then during the deployment, you are going to be asked to provide those two parameters. Okay, so you would have to type them. But if you have some default values or you want to maybe deploy them from your parameter files, which is very good idea to have when you are deploying across different environments. So you can have a parameter for dev, parameter for staging, for production and other environments that you have. So this is the way how you can define it for the storage account with parameters. But again, this is a very simplistic view to that. When you come to more of a real world scenarios where you want to have declaration, where you want to have more tight control over the what parameters, what numbers, what lengths of uh, string you want to allow to be entered as a parameter, then you want to parameterize them, right? So before going to another kind of before looking into parameterization even further, let's look at this code, which is a simple way of Azure Service Plan, right, that you need to have for your web app to be deployed first, because that Azure Service Plan ID is a part of the input that you want to have in place for your web application infrastructure as a code declaration. So here, as you see, actually, let me fix certain things here. If you deploy this, it's not going to work because the source group ID is not going to provide you location. So if you put here location name and deploy this way, then it should actually succeed. Okay, just keep that in mind, guys. Uh, And then for web app bicep, here we have the correct one. So what we can do here, you can use your Visual Studio Code skills to parameterize them. You can move this, for example, to its own parameter, can move the name of the app service plan and as well as the web app application into its own parameter and make it even better. Um, and to do that, we have a next set of the code that I'm going to share with all of you. Let me close all these files. Okay. To do that, what you would need is to go to the modules. So if you want to have a good parameterized way of looking into your storage account, here's a storage account provision with the descriptions. And here we have a storage name, right? So we want to make sure that our storage name, for example, is parameterized and it has, for example, it only allows between 3 to 24 characters long. Then you can add those declarations for validation, right? So you can add here, for example, minimum length of the storage name, and here it should be 3 if you are familiar with the storage account in Azure environment. And then you want to put the max, which is 24, right? Max length should be 24, because if you put something more than 24 characters, your deployment is going to fail. So you want to make sure you put that guardrails in your infrastructure as a code in the parameterization, so that if somebody by mistake enter parameters which are not compliant, which is going to fail, you have take care of that. And then, of course, you can use these descriptions to define what this parameter stands for. And the good thing about those descriptions is that later down in the code, if you navigate to your parameter, it would say, it would have this. Let me actually bring a tool to zoom in. I think I didn't put that on. That's why it's so small. Okay, so let me know. Okay, so here, for example, when I come to this location and zoom in, you see, guys, here actually I have this description, what this parameter stands for, the location of storage account where you want to deploy it in Azure, right? Which subscription, which Azure region you want to deploy that. So that's what it is stands for. So all these things can help to your code members or new members who join your cloud engineer team to understand what is that parameter is supposed to be doing, especially when you have like hundreds and hundreds lines of code of the complex deployments that you have for your organization. Okay, so so we have this in place. Let's save it. So this is for the storage module. Next, we have this web app, right? The same web app where you have an app service plan and you have your web app resources that needs to be deployed together, right, in order to make sense. So in our case, we have same declaration here. Some of them have, for example, app service name. There's already predefined name that's using this unique string from your resource group, so that if you are using the same resource group and you are redeploying your web app or any other resource, it's going to have this consistent name based on that resource group yeah, name. Okay, it's going to be unique string that's going to be extracted from your resource group and used in your deployment, and you will see that in action right in few seconds. Next thing, for this deployment, let's say as an output, you want to define and give back the output of the host name of the web app, so that if you have any other components of your deployment to test that, that endpoint is functional, it's reachable and it's there, you can add additional code to test them. Okay, that's why it is usually used in the deployments. But you want to make sure you don't output any secrets or any keys, anything like that. That's going to be really bad, and your security team is going to come back after those type of mistakes. You want to make sure you don't output anything that's sensitive, like passwords or keys, in your deployments and in your infrastructure as a code. All right. So once you have these two simple modules, right, which are all parameterized to a certain extent, you can, you know, go and parameterize, for example, the SKU of your service app plan based on the different environments. But we will talk about that much more. It's going to be up to your interests, what you are, want to see on our next episode, and you will have a survey to fill. By the way, Kasun, could you share on the link for our survey so that people can use that one to say what else they want to learn about infrastructure as a code
Yeah, for
before
sure.
I go to the deployment? Okay, good.
Yeah, sure. I
Uh-huh.
will share the link.
Great.
Yes.
So we have these modules. So, and the main thing here is the reuse of those modules, reuse of those storage account and web app and app service plan. that we just show. And to do that, you see here, we have more kind of guardrails here again on this main bicep file that's going to be used for deployment. But you are interesting. So if it's first time you're looking at this file, you might be interested to know, okay, what's going on this file, right? So what's going to be deployed? And to do that in Bicep extension, we have this nice little feature called visualizer, as you see here. Okay, if you click on that icon, you would get very beautiful um, visualization of the components that are going to be deployed using this file, bicep code file on the left side, which is in our case going to be deployment of two storage accounts with different names that you see here on top. And it's going to deploy a web app, okay, that's going to be coming with its own app service plan. Okay, so that's what this deployment should give us, right? That's what we see here. And to make this deployment happen, there are different ways how you can deploy it, right? So there's a way that you can deploy with the parameter file. Let's say you would like to deploy that to the dev environment. Then here, as you see under deployment, we have a parameter.json. I actually can come here and put we can rename it by param.dev.json because we want to do that for dev environment. You can create another parameter file for your test environment, staging, whatever you have there, guys. Okay. And here, as you see, we have these two parameters, stage storage name and Azure region as two parameters. And what you see here is it's a JSON declaration. It's not a bicep code, obviously, right? And we have these two parameters declared. But I will tell you that from community call, Bicep, Azure Bicep community call, the team actually is working on the Bicep representation of the parameters for Bicep code, and we can get that hopefully this year. But for now, you need to use the ARM JSON representation of parameters. So we have two parameters, sorry, and we have four resources that gonna deploy from this um, main file. But before jumping the guns here, I just want to show how we reuse those modules. So here, cloud storage main, which is the name of this module, is actually deploying the storage with parameter Azure Bicep. And if you navigate there and click on Control on your keyboard, it will become as a link. So if I click on it, it will navigate you to the actual Bicep file, which is the storage with parameterization. I will click on it, and here we go. We come to that navigation. So this is a very handy way to navigate between your modules. And the same thing is true for the last deployment here. So we have another cloud storage deployment using our Bicep module. And then we have name for the storage account using the storage account name plus we have a prefix here. These are the where we put the parameters. And for the web app, you have another kind of module here. You can click on it and see what's there. And for now, we just have one location parameter here. But if you scroll down here and click on control space or just go there, you will see that you can actually add two more parameters if you don't want to use default values that are generated for the app service app name and for the service plan that it is going to have in the deployment. So you have all options to see and explore how you can reuse the code for different type of deployments. Okay, I hope that makes sense, guys. But now next step is to put them into work, right? We want them to be deployed on Azure portal and see and click around and then test. To do that, we have a folder here called scripts, and in this folder I put all the PowerShell and as well as Azure CLI declaration of it. If you never use the Azure CLI, I'll make it a little bigger here. Okay, and take this out. If you never used the Azure CLI before, this would be a good way to start as well doing that. The first line, if you run this, it will actually, let's run this. It will give you URL and as well as code. Let's wait a little bit. So it's running that first piece of code. So if you go to this Azure URL and you have your Azure subscription and put this code, it will connect, bring your Azure credentials into the Visual Studio Code so that you can deploy using your credentials. Okay, so that's how it is happening here. Next, I will go back to terminal here. Okay, terminate, yes. Let's clean it. Next is actually, once you logged in, you want to go and make sure that you pick up the correct subscription if you have multiple. And that one I can check here. In my case, it's the correct subscription where I want to deploy this. Then you can, to be sure, what you can do next is you can actually list all the resource groups that you have in your subscription. In my case, it should list all the resource groups, and I have here close to 7 resource groups under this subscription, which is, that's what I was expecting to have. Let's clear this screen. Next, after that, what we want to do is we want to create a new resource group, and you can put here whatever the resource group name you want to have. In my case, we can say it's episode 1. Okay, Bicep RG. So this is our resource group that we want to create. So if you want to create that, again, you want to type az group create dash name and then location and then run it. Or you can code it and then you can just right click and say, okay, go and deploy this. And once this succeeded, you should get this succeeded response back, which is awesome. So if you go and list our, let me clean this. And if we go and list our all the resource groups that we have, now it should be 8 resource groups, including episode 1 dash bicep dash rg, the one that you see here, right? This is the one we just deployed and it is there, meaning that we can use that one for our deployment. In terms of deployments, that are depending on a scope, you have different ways to deploy. We will keep things simple to resource group at this you know so let me go switch the gears here and let's look into the Azure portal. Please let me know if you see the Azure portal that I'm showing here at the moment. So here,
Yeah,
is it visible, Kasun? How
yeah,
do you
yeah.
see?
It's visible. Yeah.
Okay, so let me make it a bit bigger. So here, what we did, guys, we just deployed this resource group, right? So it should be empty. It's the resource group in our Azure subscription. If I go and click on it, okay, show hidden. So there is nothing here, right? So we don't have anything. When you look at deployment tab, you see that there was no deployment, so it's blank, right? So what we're gonna do now, I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio Code, and because we already created this resource group, I want to make sure that I use the same resource group for deployment. And for simplicity of this first deployment, I'm going to use the inline parameters. So what is an inline parameter is that you can actually deploy this main.bicep, the bicep code that has 4 resources that we just look into there, right? They're like storage accounts, 2 of them. There's a web app and there's the app service plan. And then you can define parameters inline like you see here on this screen, right? So I have 2 parameters here, have storage name and Azure region. Each of them have their own unique. So if you want to change them, you are welcome. For example, this one for storage name, you can say, okay, let me put uh, CL, which is a cloud journey, and CLS 235 and East USSR region. So I have a dash C here at the end, and what this dash C stands for is actually if you want to have a conditional deployment to see what are going to be the changes that are going to be deployed into your resource group, then you can get that information. You remember this about state machine that we mentioned in the slides about that. You can check the environment to see what is the current status of the resources that are in that resource group or subscription based on the scope of your deployment. You can do that with dash C, which stands for conditional deployment. Let's run this. Okay,
Uh, can I
but
add another
go
point
ahead,
to
please.
this?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sure.
So there's a very handy flag in this CLI is called what if dash what if. So when you put what if, we can get a run, a dry run, and see
Hmm.
what type of a effect it happens when you run this deployment. So
Yes.
for
Yeah.
example, if it is doing any changes, or if it is affecting any deletions or adding new resources like that.
Hmm. So yeah, that's really good. So what Kasun was alluding to. So let me actually bring this. I will copy that script as is and bring into our command line. So if here you see we have this AZ deployer. So I'm going to take this dash C out, and I'm going to come to the beginning of this deployment, which is using the parameter files. So instead of this, we can say AZ deployment group, what if, correct?
Yeah, what if?
Yes,
No. You have to go dot use a group create. It is a what
yes,
if flag.
yes. Group create, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can use this what if flag, but for our case, that what if flag is similar to dash C at the end, because in both cases it will show
Okay.
you the change, right?
Yeah.
So let's run this code now. So what we should expect is that our template is going to be sent to the Azure subscription and check our storage account and see what's inside that storage account. And all the changes that are going to happen based on the, you know, configuration and the resources that we have in our bicep file, it will show us. Okay, so let me expand this. So we get this response, you see, the one that Kasun was mentioning. It says that, hey, we are going to create this. Green stands for create. So if there's a modification, you would see another color as well. Okay, and for delete as well, you will have something that you can do on a resource group level, not on subscription. Okay, so here, this is the new storage account that's going to be created. Then it's going to create another storage account, which is defined here. And then it says that it's going to create a my app plan, which is defined here, and it will create another my app. So it's going to create the site with this, you know, with this name. So let's make it happen. To make this deployment happen, we need to make our choice and say, are we agree with that? We want to deploy or not? Let's deploy it. I put the Y there. So now deployment is actually going to take place. And this yellow message that you see here, it's normal. It means that there was a new upgrade pushed for the Azure Bicep for the version 15.0.15.31. So if you want to upgrade, you just need to type AZ Bicep upgrade and it will do that for you. But for now, we are deploying that file. So while deployment is in progress, I'm going to switch back to our portal, Azure portal, and let's see if we can see any progress there. So I'm back on the Azure portal, the same resource group, right, that we were deploying to, and it's empty at the moment. So I click on refresh, and I see that deployments, there were 4 deployments for 2 storage accounts. Then there's a main file and web app main. And then if I go to the resources to look overview, I said 4 resources are deployed here, which means that it was successful. You can click on your app service plan, look at that. You can also click on your web app and then click on the browse and see. It's going to be, of course, blank web app, nothing special here, but it should come up. So it's loading here, as you see. So now I'm going to switch back to our Visual Studio Code, and you see it's successful. So our deployment actually succeeded. We don't see any errors here. And if we uh, and as we were expecting, it deployed 4 files. Now this was deployment using the inline parameters. If you do want to do the same thing using the parameter JSON file, the one that I show you, which is the preferred way if you are going to deploy it to different environments, rather than typing each time and making errors right on the parameter names. This is going to be much handy to deploy across different environments. In our case, I'm just mentioning that it needs to be .dev because I made that change there, right? So you want to make sure it's .dev, and you can put this name into resource group name into variable and refer that variable in your deployment. In my case, is to keep the thing simple, I just put the blank name here on this deployment. So this is the file. So if you guys come and use this on your testing environment, it should all work. And these are the two different ways how to do that. And that's pretty much end of the demo here. Again, go to this episode 1, infrastructure as a code in Azure, GitHub repo that's displayed on the page, and try this code and let us know how it worked. And in addition to that, I want to thank you everyone who listened our first episode. It went a little bit above 1 hour, so because it was an introduction and we want to cover everything here with Kasun. And there's also a survey form, right? Can you bring that as well, Kasun, and put that in the links? We are really, really interested to actually hear from you guys, because this was just warm up introduction to infrastructure as a code in Azure. We do understand that there's different things that you want to learn and you're interested. So we want to provide that for you, but we need your feedback. So that's why this form is there. Please go there, provide your feedback. We will review and actually share it back with the community, what the people put there, what they want to learn. And based on that, we'll be here to help you in your cloud learning journey. Kasun, back to you.
Yeah, I think that's our main goal for the start in this channel. So, if you guys need any additional deep dive areas you would like to explain and like to know, then let us know so uh, we can schedule a live stream like
Next
this
session.
and
Yeah.
discuss those concepts in future.
Yeah. Yeah, before saying goodbye, there are more things to share, right? So first
Yeah,
of all, what we covered here, it's all displayed on this slide. I'm not going to go one by one. And then next thing is resources, right? So what you saw here, and if you are watching us on a phone, here's the QCR code that you can actually take the link and go and check that GitHub repo. In addition, I have an Azure Bicep First Look course on LinkedIn, so you can also check that one if you're just starting with Bicep. Then we have another set of good resources learning about Azure Bicep in this community-driven, awesome Azure Bicep GitHub, and Kasun is actually one of the contributors there, right? So we have more than 10 people who are contributed. So check this out. If you see something is missing, make your PR and we will review and make sure it's there. Okay, so be part of that learning journey. And plus Bicep project, right? This is the official Bicep project from Microsoft. And if you wonder what is that new version 15.31, I believe, 0.1531 has in place, you can check that file. It will tell you everything about that new version of Bicep and what the bug fixes or maybe new features team has added over the months. Okay, that said, I want to thank you everyone who joined our episode, especially Kasun as well, because he worked very hard to make this happen. We worked together. Uh, please follow Kasun on his Twitter. Follow me on as a Cloud Marathoner. This is the blogs which I am running, and Kasun runs his own blog.
yeah,
And plus, check our subscribe to our YouTube channel, because there's more to come.
yeah.
And based on your feedback, based on what you want to learn in infrastructure as a code, we will restructure the episodes and we will share the back with the community what was the survey results in our next episode with the top one pickup that you put there, right? So that's what we want to do for you and everyone who want to start their cloud infrastructure journey. No matter where you are, you might be very new beginner, you might be experienced, so you want to learn more about real world scenarios that we want to bring for you to you as well, but we want to start in a way that it's most helpful for the community. um, Back to you, Kasun. Do you want to add anything for the viewers as our final remarks?
Yeah, so I want to thank the who are participate for today and the comments. So as you mentioned, so if we like to do this in future, so we like to know your feedback and what are the areas do you like to learn and explore. So uh, please give your feedback so then we can uh, line up our coming live streams.
Yes. And another idea might be that if you're interested in more kind of interactions, for
Yeah,
example, we may go ahead maybe create a Discord channel for you guys, right? So that we
yeah,
can look at the problems, troubleshoot together, and learn in the process, and make it, cloud infrastructure a better choice for your project, a better choice for your dream project that maybe you want to build on the side. Who knows? Everybody has their own goals and wishes to accomplish, and infrastructure as a code is there to help you with those things. All right, that's all on my end. Thank you everyone for joining again. We are looking for your comments and feedback on the survey. Please check those resources that we just shared on the previous slide here. They are very useful and it's a good place to start. And have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
yeah. So thank you very much for everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Take
Have a
care,
good
guys.
weekend. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.